Welcome back to another episode of 5ASIDE on beIN Sports. This week, we're having an extremely topical debate about African football, all things African football. The first question is, Samuel Eto'o and Didier Drogba have been cemented as the best African players of all time. We know this, but there's a certain Egyptian that's following in their footsteps. So the question is, what does Mo Salah have to do to get on their level? Kendrick, what do you think?
Start with Kendrick. The thing, I don't know. A lot of people aren't going to like this. But the thing that comes to my mind first is like all the things that both of these players have done for their countries, right? So when you think about Drogba, you think about everything that he did for Ivory Coast. You think about him stopping a civil war in his country. When you think about Eto'o, you think about him going back to take on a leadership role for Cameroon in the Footballing Federation. And obviously, like, that's a little bit more of like a post-career thing. But like when I think of Salah, he's in his prime right now. I just think about his goals. I need to, in order for him to surpass them in my mind, I feel like there needs to be something that like he did, or like a moment where it's like, okay, he did X, Y, Z for his country in a way that those legends did.
Well, I think that honestly, he's probably already at their level. And speaking of things that he's done for their country, if you look up some of the things that he's done for Egypt, the impact he's had is he's one of the most impactful people in low-key Egyptian history. And we've heard stories from like our guy Kareem Abdul talking about what he means to that community, how he'll randomly send money to cover people's medical bills, people who have never met him before, how random people who are sitting in poverty look at Mohamed Salah for a financial opportunity to be able to have coverage. That's how much he supports his country. And on the pitch, he has 3 Premier League Golden Boots. To get the exact stats, as of today, 187 goals in 304 Premier League appearances and 87 assists.
Wait. It's evergreen. It's evergreen.
Oh.
So no, you can just...
Almost 200 goals. Yeah,
Exactly.
okay. And to get just straight to the football pitch, to get straight to the football pitch, he has about 200 Premier League goals.
Liked and on the pitch.
Huh?
That was perfect.
Okay. And on the pitch, I mean, the stats and the play speaks for itself. 3-time Premier League Golden Boot winner, around 200 goals and 90 assists, which are better stats than Didier Drogba already. The only thing I think he's missing, if we're talking purely footballing, is winning an AFCON for Egypt, who is the most successful AFCON country. So they haven't won it with him at the team just yet. I think that's also because he's not in their golden era, so the teammates around him aren't as good. But with the likes of Marmoush next to him, I do think the chances are better, and the pressure is on to finally get that trophy. So if he wins an AFCON with Egypt, he might genuinely already in that moment be the best player of African history. There's obviously some debates. You got George Weah, only one with the Ballon d'Or. Some people think Salah could have gotten a Ballon d'Or, right?
Salah also doesn't have a treble.
A treble, true. I agree. The back-to-back trebles Eto'o has makes that
nasty.
It is. But when you think about longevity of career too, I think that puts Salah, if he gets an AFCON with Egypt, potentially past Eto'o. And I would say definitely past Drogba personally. And he has the Champions League to go with it as well.
So that's that kind of brings me to my next question, which we've put on the docket. People committing to playing for national teams. Of course, players like Salah, Marmoush have always had that one mindset for playing for a country like Egypt. That's where they're from, that's where they were born, and that's who they want to represent. However, there is talk about a lot of African nationals who maybe were born in France or born in England or born in the Netherlands who wait till they're maybe 26 or 27 or 28 to then commit to play for their African national team. The question is, for us as members of the diaspora on this podcast, how do we feel about that? Because it's been a lot of conversation regarding players choosing to play for African teams late. Josh, I'll start with you. How do you feel about it?
For sure. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, intent is something that is always valued. You wouldn't want to be your crush's second choice. You know what I mean? So therefore, I hope that my crush picks me first. You know what I mean? In the same way, you would hope that footballers choose and go for the nations that they feel most aligned with. And they see just more, I guess, connection too. Some of these players would say at first maybe, they were looking to have a track, whether it be in England, France, U.S., these countries. But the reality of the fact is, you're your parents' kids as well. And so it's always beautiful when you see people come around and honestly at any point in their life realize like there's value in being able to play for back home. So,
Gabe, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I agree that you don't want to be the second choice, but I do think there's instances where maybe they made the realization late that, no, I genuinely do want to play for this diaspora country that is of my parents' heritage. So they do make that realization late. I think there still is value in it. the like of an Iñaki Williams playing for your team, Ghana. Like, I don't think that's hurt to Ghana, but I do think in general agreed that it should be your first choice. But if they do come around late, I don't see that as a negativity, as long as they bring the same passion as the kids who did choose it as their first choice.
And then again, the thing that comes up for discussion is, okay, does that not prevent, but, you know, create a situation in which the local leagues and the local players who are on their way up, is there, you know, a blocker in that sense, you know?
That's a really good point, and it shows the nuance of this discussion. But I think there are also examples of countries that have flourished with majority local talent. So if we look at South Africa right now, and they're pushed to like qualify for the World Cup, they're mostly made up of players who play in the domestic league, and yet they're on top of teams from around the diaspora like Nigeria, who currently are filled with players who play outside of the country. And so there's always going to be, I don't know how to fucking finish this.
There's always going to be people from the diaspora coming in, you're saying?
There's always going to be players who
Say a balance is needed.
Yeah, I would say it's between the two.
So basically, like, there needs to be balance, and like there's always going to be opportunities for players domestically to shine and put on for their country.
Speaking of people coming from abroad and playing for a national team, the other conversation, Kendrick, I want to ask you first about this, is about coaches coming from abroad and coaching national teams that they are not nationals of. A country like Cameroon right now has a Belgian coach. In the past, there have been countries that have had French coaches. Saudi Arabia, for example, in the World Cup, had a French coach. Yep. How do you feel about that, specifically in the context of African football? And what do you think needs to happen, perhaps, to change this? Or do you think it's something that should be changed at all?
I do think it's something that should be changed. I think historically, the inclusion of like non-African coaches representing or coaching African teams has been associated with a distrust for like the acumen and like football IQ of coaches that are from the continent trying to coach their local teams. And I think to go along with that, we've seen a lot of success when teams put faith in coaches from their home country. Morocco obviously being the most recent example, hiring Walid Regragui, who carried them.
Walid, just say Walid.
Yeah. Morocco being the most recent example, bringing back their head coach, Walid, who has carried them to the semifinals in the World Cup in 2022. And so we see that there's a formula when you trust the coaches from your home country, and I think more countries should do it.
One of my favorite stories in AFCON history is what happened with Ivory Coast last AFCON when they started the tournament with a foreign coach, ended the tournament with that coach's interim. His last name is Faye, so Ivory Coast's coach currently is Faye, and he managed to take them all the way to the final. It's a story of someone who's from the country, who was part of the coaching staff, who is Ivorian, who understood how to kind of motivate a team at their lowest point because he could relate with the players in a way that perhaps someone who was a foreigner couldn't.
Yep. As the host nation specifically, too, which is a different type of intensity.
And so I think that example is what I would present to the table for anyone who would argue against the fact that it's good to have people from your country coaching your players, because there's a certain relatability that someone from your country can have with you. I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that people from outside of the country aren't competent. I just think when you're coaching a national team, you have so few games, it becomes so little less about tactics and so much more about being able to motivate a group of people around a country and around a flag. Yeah. It's always better to have someone from that place than not. So that would be my simple argument for why I think you should kind of invest in people from your country than people who aren't from it.
Yeah. And if you look across the world, from World Cups to AFCONs to Copa America, et cetera, it's likely a coach from that country winning the trophy in the end. So.
Yes, absolutely. Anyway, great segue, because speaking about countries from across the world, the last question that I have for you guys is one that doesn't get brought up enough, I think. And we're in a World Cup cycle. We're speaking about teams qualifying for World Cup more and more and more. Africa, with its 52 countries, only has 9 guaranteed spots. Kendrick, is that enough?
We need to talk about the numbers. What are the comparisons?
Let me get them for you. To give some context, Africa gets 9 spots, Asia gets 8, Europe gets 16, North, Central America, and the Caribbean, so CONCACAF gets 6 spots, 3 for the host, 3 for qualification. South America, CONMEBOL gets 6 spots, Oceania gets 1 spot, and there are 2 additional spots for intercontinental playoff.
It's a disgrace, man. You know, honestly, it reminds me of the reality of the most maps that we look at. The size of the continent is not appropriate at all. That's just a fact. Maybe I violated,
No,
but like,
it's true. It's true.
Yeah, it's true because that
That's-
should be stretched in other directions to make the West look bigger.
bro, like the continent is bigger than a lot of this shit. I don't know if I could talk like this, but you
No,
feel me?
definitely not.
Yeah, cool. So like, that's what it reminded me of, generally speaking.
Yeah. I think.
You got to talk.
Oh yeah. Well,
You have
because you did.
because it has to go to you now.
All right. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it should have been more balanced a long time ago. Personally, I think that every continent should have equal representation. I think that's the only way to make it fit, like just fair from the jump, that if every continent has an equal chance at winning the World Cup. Because if you look at the history of the World Cup, most of the winners come from Europe, and it's because, like, at the end of the day, they have more representation.
I think, first off, I'm actually going to say I'm happy it jumped to 9 this time for an expanded format of 48 teams, because in the previous 32-team format, there was only 5 spots for Africa, which that to me is a complete disgrace. That is unbelievably competitive to have that few spots for the World Cup. But the fact that they didn't double the amount of total World Cup teams, but almost doubled the amount of African teams in the World Cup, I think that is actually a beneficial thing. And I think that now we're getting closer towards a more equal representation. So that jump from 5 to 9, I think, is actually huge. And we're going to see, hopefully, some new countries in the World Cup, too.
What I will add is that perhaps a potential solution, as we get better with travel and being able to move from one place to another quicker and quicker, is to perhaps have qualifiers be global instead of doing qualifiers within confederations. Open it up. Anyway, we'll end the episode like that. Guys, have a good one. Thank you for tuning in for 5ASIDE, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye.